Hey, welcome to another episode from Your Own Pathway Therapy Conversations. Here, we talk about what most therapists only whisper about. Here, we speak about what topics we've been conditioned to stay quiet about and the ones that rock the boat. But nope, we're not protecting that silence anymore, and we are breaking it. So let's own it. Today's episode is a continuation from my previous episode that I put out last time. And if you watch my therapy conversation episode previously, I talked about why therapists don't trust pop psychology. And if you haven't had a chance to watch it, I can also put the link in the description box. But in that video, I explored how highly visible motivational figures, the ones with massive platforms and best selling frameworks, often package psychological concepts in ways that are very accessible, compelling, and emotionally energizing. But the thing is, accessibility is not the same as containment. And that episode wasn't about attacking individuals, it was about examining a pattern. And today's episode is an extension of that conversation because the same pattern we see in pop psychology for individuals also shows up in corporate mental well being. And yes, this episode is going to go there today. So, corporations consistently platform high profile motivational speakers who I also talked about in the previous episode, and oftentimes do have the same speakers to that kind of caliber to speak at their, annual meetings or their retreats. And oftentimes, these motivational speakers speak about resilience, mindset, emotional intelligence, burnout, vulnerability, personal growth. And again, I want to say this is not an attack. And many of these speakers that are often platform are very skilled communicators. They are powerful storytellers. They are effective at creating emotional momentum. But again, what they sell is structurally and oftentimes mirrors pop psychology. When I think about this is not a shade, but this is like very TED Talk people. Yes, I said that. And a lot of it also goes back to individual regulation, personal accountability, internal shifts. And when corporations hire these type of speakers, they are often hiring pop psychology at scale. And I want to say that this isn't accidental, it's structural. Why? So, I want to share a kind of like a personal story about my own journey. So, I started my therapy, doing therapy in 2022 when I opened my own business. And I also wanted to really talk about, mental well being and communication, all these like in different settings. And yet I noticed that people who were not in my field were not getting called into for these um, events. And it was actually people who had nothing to do with mental well being that were actually being called in. And, I observe and I noticed that these conversations around organizational and around leadership, around conflict and culture, I noticed something. I noticed that clinically trained professionals were rarely the ones being invited to corporate spaces to talk about mental well being. And if I'm honest, there were moments of wonder, like, I'm like, why aren't we be seen? And when I say we, I meant us as clinically trained. And then I realized over time something very important that shifted everything. It wasn't about capability, it was about readiness. Organizations hire according to what they are prepared to examine. And many organizations are not ready for structural accountability. That's right. I said that they're not ready for structural accountability. So let's talk about what that actually means. And so I'm going to explain it. What corporations are actually buying when they invest in mental well being? They are not buying sustained emotional containment. They are not buying systematic safety. What they are is they are purchasing momentary emotional regulation. And this includes short term soothing, moral repair, emotional discharge, catharsis, reassurance. And I want to define something clearly. When I say cheap relief, I don't mean financially inexpensive. Many high profile keynotes, the ones that I mentioned in the previous episodes, cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and even sometimes a million to even show up. What I mean is structurally inexpensive. The thing is, it is cheaper to regulate emotion than to repair structure because true organizational change requires an organization to actually examine leadership behavior, revise policy, confront ethical risks, repairing institutional trust, restructuring incentives, altering promotion pathways that are holding power and holding people accountable. So when you think about it, that work is way more expensive and it's more financially and politically um, more expensive. So what is the other alternative is hiring motivational frameworks, which becomes a rational cost avoidance strategy. What it is relief without reform. So, I think a lot of us who have worked in corporate or, healthcare, whatever workplace, or even when we listen to like TED Talks or when we listen to people on their podcasts or YouTube. Yes, I'm saying YouTube, even though I have a YouTube channel. If you listen closely to the dominant, like especially the corporate wellness messaging, despite different personalities and the branding, the outcome is often the same. And the messaging is the individual in the corporation, in your workplace, must adapt. The system remains intact, however. The messaging emphasizes manage your reaction, be more resilient. You know what? You just need to shift your mindset. Or let's practice vulnerability. Let's regulate your emotions. And how do we optimize your performance? Notice, notice that none of that is inherently wrong. However, notice where the focus lands. And it lands at the micro level, the individual. So it puts all the accountability back on you, the worker within this large system that says, hey, you know what? Maybe you're not being vulnerable enough. Or, you know what? Maybe you're not optimizing enough. Or, maybe you just need to shift your mindset. We hardly ever, rarely hear in these corporate wellness, talks is who is actually being promoted, who exits and why, who reports harm, what happens after, what behaviors are modeled in leadership, what incentives are sustaining burnout. I think most of us who are watching this who are therapists, clinical systems training, we are trained as a social worker. Part of my undergrad was very much about clinical systems and training. And clinical systems training, doing this type of work as therapists, widens the lens of all of this. And it asks, what system is shaping this dysregulation be pattern? What environment is influencing the stress response of your employees? What leadership behaviors are interacting with these outcomes? What policies are reinforcing these dynamics? What incentives are sustaining them? Instead of teaching people how to better manage stress, the inquiry expands, especially when we are systems trained, and we look at the whole systems. We begin examining how systems impact regulation, safety, and emotional outcomes. And the questions that I just asked, they require something many organizations are still developing, which is the capacity to exam structure without being defensive. Not every organization is prepared to sustain that level of inquiry because once you begin asking those questions, you can't remain at the level of moral repair. You're now looking at system design. And I also want to further add that I know that DEI has been a word that is hush hush, and people are, there's been a lot of policies trying to dismantle DEI. And this pattern extends into DEI as well. And this is, as I'm doing this episode, I want to say this is not at all an argument against diversity, equity, or inclusion because representation matters, belonging matters, equity matters. The question is not whether DEI is important. The question is what happens after the workshop. So yes, if DEI remains at awareness level but never reaches structural reform, the accountability drifts downward. And when structural accountability is absent, responsibility defaults back to the individual. And I want to say that, this is not maliciously intended. Oftentimes, it's not maliciously intended. What it does, it is structurally protective. So a lot of us therapists, and I want to say a lot of us, and not all of us, because I know that not all of us have the same training. And when we talk about trauma and being trauma informed, when we are trauma informed in systems, in a systems, at a systems level, we ask, is the environment safe? While corporate wellness often asks, how do we keep people functioning? And those two are not the same question. When system produces stress response but focus only on teaching individuals to regulate, that's where the root dynamics remain untouched. So I asked this question at the beginning where I shared my story of, why are therapists why are we being bypassed, and why are the corporate, wellness influencers, so the one with the big platforms, the MBAs, the Juris Doctors, why are they being the ones called in to talk about the things that we do and we teach our clients? And so why are therapists often bypassed? And I want to reinforce again that it is not because of our lack of expertise. It is the incompatibility with systems that are not yet prepared for structural examination. Again, I now realize as I'm doing all of this is that organizations hire according to their readiness. Some may be seeking optimization. Some maybe, are beginning to build capacity for structural accountability, but both are stages. But they are not at the same stage. So in places like this, and corporations like this, relief has a place. Inspiration has a place. emotional regulation has a place. But the thing is, without containment, those tools stabilize people inside environments that may still be misaligned. And the thing is, over time, stabilization without reform produces fatigue. So, when we talk about well being, and especially real well being, whether in therapy or in organizations, it is often not measured by how well people cope. It is measured by whether the environment itself becomes safer, more accountable, and more aligned. And honestly, talking about this type of work that we do is not flashy. It's not it's like it's not flashy, it's not like, oh, look at this. This type of work is very deliberate, and it requires leaders willing to examine system design, not just employee performance. And so I want to end this episode for anybody who's watching this, whether you're a therapist or you are part of an organization that, speaking as a systems trained therapist, doing systems trained work now, is we are the ones that really challenge organizations to look within their systems if they truly want to change. And if you are an organization or CEO or HR, whoever your role is, whatever your role is, and you notice that even after you have all of these speakers and, emotional regulation, resilience training, and yes, the intervention, there's change for a little bit, but things continue to be the same. I challenge you and say, are you ready to actually look at your systems? So, that is all I have for this week's Therapy Conversations episode. And again, this is your own pathway where therapy conversations are no longer silence and we own this. And so, therapists, we are owning this, and we are owning our expertise and our knowledge. So, I hope you all take care of yourself, have a safe week, and I will see you all next time. Bye.